go. Hello, this is Kim M. Clark. I'm the publisher of Deep Waters Books, and we are now on the Write Your Book Masterclass Program Overview. And I have an author, Ron Clark, who is also my husband and co-author of my sixth book, which I'm going to grab right here, that we wrote. It's a bestseller on a dynamic, here we go.
Yes, you can.
Dynamic Chat GPT, which we wrote on using artificial intelligence, specifically Chat GPT for business. So it's a very insightful book and it's very helpful. It is available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold, including on our publishing website at deepwatersbooks.com. So Ron, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I do have a master class on write your book because so many people have said they want to write a book and they don't finish. And actually, I have a little slide that I want to share on my screen before we get in our interview questions. I'll do that right now, which is kind of an interesting fact. And can you see the screen?
I can.
Great.
Yes.
So of the 95% that decide to write a book, only 3% finish and only 0.06 get published. But Amazon actually publishes about 6,000 books a day. So we do have a huge influx of books being published with the print on demand, the newest part of that industry of printing. But a lot of times what I'm finding is the quality is not where one would expect a published book to be. I get a lot of people asking me, hey, can you market my book? I have a master's of science in marketing from Johns Hopkins. I'm a former marketing professor. And a lot of people said, great, can I hire you as a consultant to market my book? And once I look at their book and find, I don't know, 25 errors in the first 25 pages for grammar. And I am not a copy editor, which is a grammar specialist. If I can find the errors, then I have to say, no, take the funds you were going to use to hire me as a marketing consultant and actually put that into copy editing. I'll put you in touch with my copy editor we use as a publisher and get your book professionally copy edited. And most of the time they tell me no, which is pretty sad. So, it's really important to not only finish your book, but get it done in a way that's professional and it doesn't bring down your name or your brand, which is pretty important. And it's also important when you get into an organization, into a program that has accountability and you have some skin in the game. And as my husband, who's a former marathon, Ron, taught me how to run my marathon, and I had an accountability group, as well as I registered for my first Disney marathon, which at that time cost me about $700. I had skin in the game and accountability. And for 30 years for trying to run a marathon or saying I was going to run a marathon, it wasn't until I was 47 and had that accountability. I had a runner's group, and also I had my husband help keep me accountable. I had a plan. And I had skin in the game. I registered, which is why I developed this masterclass for Write Your Book. So what's really important to create a masterclass is to beat the odds and receive the expert coaching in writing. Also, we talked about the supportive critique and accountability group. Critiques are very important because iron sharpens iron. Also avoids costly rewrites. My first book took me about 5 years from start to when I was holding the finished copy in my hand. Now, because I know how to write a book and I know what's required, it takes me 18 months from idea to finished book. So in the program and Write Your Book, you get a step-by-step writing strategies, personalized but expert feedback on how to write, accountability with group sessions, and insider knowledge on the publishing industry. And accountability is really strong. That feedback and support and realistic goals really help you as an aspiring author create a manuscript that people would want to read. And of course, critique group is really important. We use the sandwich method where we say something positive about what someone has written. We say an area that we'd like to see an improvement, and then we end with something positive as well. It's really important to encourage writers and encourage the process of writing, and that's one thing we do. And also we talk about really, some of the things we talk about in the writers group is finding your voice, which is everyone's voice when they're writing is different, just like everyone's voice is different for when they're speaking. But when you're writing, you have your own specific voice. It varies with your pace, your tone, and we'll kind of go into that a little bit more detail. And to keep your audience engaged and to learn how to balance these elements will help you control your story's rhythm and keep your audience captivated. You want your audience to not only keep reading, but recommend your book to someone else. We'll also talk about character development, point of view, which is POV, and hooks. This is great for fiction and nonfiction, whether you're writing children's books or you're writing for an audience of adults. It's really important to have well-developed characters. It's called an immersive point of view, where you want the reader to taste, smell, see, feel what the character, your characters, or what you're experiencing in the book that you're sharing in your manuscript. It's important to keep your readers engaged so they'll continue reading. This is good for both nonfiction and fiction, and you really want to hone your craft as a writer because your story really deserves to be told. And it's one thing to ask. A lot of people will write something, but they're not writing for their audience. How do you want to help your audience? How do you want to help your reader? What's your message? How will your story change lives? It's really changing the view or perspective of your writing. And I can't tell you people they've written from an aspect of a journal. They're writing a journal, which is very personal. And I have to question them saying, how can this help your reader? I felt like I was reading your journal. And they'll say, oh, I didn't even think about my reader. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty important. That's the whole crux of reading. Classes start soon. We have 3 times. First is a Saturday morning, then we have Tuesday evenings, then we also have Thursdays. And then you can jump on with a one-time payment or with 3 monthly payments or weekly payments. It's a little bit more expensive. The one-time payment, it does have a discount of $500. So it is significant. You can sign up at deepwatersbooks.com. And before we go into questions, Ron, I wanted to talk to you. You're an author, you're a business owner, you're a highly accomplished business owner. You've brought several businesses from start to several $1 million in revenue. And we wrote our first book together, which is Amazon
We did.
bestseller and award winner. And how would you talk about the process and the importance of working with someone who knows what they're doing?
Sure. Well, now I understand why so many people don't publish a book, don't finish even writing the book, because you get stuck in a million different places along the way.
It's so true.
And it's an arduous process. So, you have two things working against you. You have a lack of knowledge of how to move the process forward, and then a lack of resources of being able to speak to someone who can help you overcome those obstacles so that you can finish the book. So that's, to me, those are the two biggest reasons why I had never finished a book and why I'm sure so many others have not finished a book as well. It's not about time. You can always find the time to write. It's finding the right knowledge base and what you're going to write about, and then how to frame that so that people are going to want to read it.
And it,
That to me is like, you can throw up all over a page. That doesn't mean someone wants to read it. It has to be done in a way that that's going to draw the reader in and keep their attention so that they're going to want to tell other people, hey, this is a really good book. You want to buy this. It's really well written.
I agree. I think you hit on 2 really important parts. One is the discipline of writing, and also what to write. You're right. You can get disciplined in, okay, I'm going to write so much time a day, but if I'm not writing well,
Right.
that was just a really expensive waste of time.
Right.
And I don't think it's actually a waste if you've written it. I should rephrase that or reframe that. It's practice, but you do need to rewrite it. And after 3 very time consuming rewrites of my first book, it's really important to avoid that as a first time author, because I can't tell you how many people I have to tell them, I'm sorry, this needs to be rewritten. So,
Right.
but I really appreciate that perspective you have, and you brought that forth. So that brings me to my next question. How has writing the book helped you as a business owner or as a professional?
It has a tremendous impact because your name is on a book, and it's something that so few people are able to finish, are able to do. And so it raises your profile in the eyes of others. And I think that it automatically makes you an expert in your field, whatever it is that your field happens to be. We wrote it on AI simply because of my background in AI. But it elevated me to a position where people don't even question what it is that I'm saying. And there's an important element there is that the book gives you instant credibility so that when you go to speak on behalf of whatever's in the book, that credibility is instantly spread through the whole crowd, and they are literally in the palm of your hand. And it's amazing, even with my background, and I don't want to brag about stuff that I've done, but I mean, I have a pretty good background when it comes to business, but
Absolutely, you do.
when it when writing this book, all of a sudden it's like, oh, everything else I've ever done has been swept into the river, and it's like, but he's an author, and so I knew going in, having talked to other authors and having seen other events, how writing a book would have an impact. I knew it would have an impact. I just had no idea how big of an impact it would have.
And I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, you could have done amazing things, but then to have a book and then to have a best-selling book that
Yeah.
makes such a difference for your credibility. It's, I mean, because, and also then when they get the book, they're looking at, I'm like, oh, this is well formatted, this is well written, there's not errors. I can't tell you how many people I'll say, oh, I'll hear speak, and I'm like, this is great, let me see your book. And it's
Right.
chock full of errors, grammatical
Right.
errors. It's not formatted correctly. It looks like they ran this off in their, in their garage and
Yeah.
just got it bound at Staples, I mean, that's fine. But it to me, that I was just, that plummets their credibility in my book because
And
I'm
it,
like,
it does. Yeah.
it absolutely does. And even that was
Yeah.
before becoming an author and a publisher. I would look at this going, wow, you didn't even research how to do this well. That
Yeah.
brings up your credibility. Like, did you even research what you're telling me now?
And
Well,
I would say that one of the reasons you want to have someone guiding you along the way, which you did for me, the importance of that is that you could write an entire book on your own, get to the very end, hand that manuscript over to a publisher, and find out that the whole thing needs to be rewritten again. And the year or so that you spent writing this really turns out to be you've wasted an enormous amount of time of your life writing what you thought was something very good, but you didn't have the expertise and you didn't ask. And to me, I'm like, whenever I go to do something that I'm not sure how to do, my first thought is I'm going to find people who know how to do this, and I'm going to model what they do or listen to them as they guide me on what to do. I've done that in business, and obviously having being married to you and having access to you and what a resource you are for writing. It would have been foolishness for me to think I'm just going to write this on my own. I mean, I have a minor in English from college. I have written before. I've written articles and so forth. But writing a book is an entirely different animal. And there are a lot of things that I was willing to admit I did not know that you did, which is why we were able to take this from conception to publishing in just a few months. You were really able to help me craft these chapters and do the things I would not have been able to do on my own.
yeah, and absolutely. And I want to give kudos to you for your teachability because it is hard to come from, oh, look, I can write. I can't tell people tell me I can write. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't know how to write for publication, which is a
Yeah.
big difference. And for example, my first book, my first manuscript, I had three people review it and proofread it and edit it prior to sending it to a professional copy editor who does for publishing industry. So I had an English composition professor, 101, English 101 composition professor review it. I had someone who does editing for a large organization, business. And then I had another formatting editor, which is different than a copy editor. I had those
Mm.
three people review it. And then when I sent it, and my book in Word was about 274 pages. In a 6x9, when I finally published it, it was over 300 pages, 375. But just to give you an idea, this was not a tiny little book. It was a large book. It's actually Deep Waters Lift Your Gaze. But in that book, in that manuscript, when I sent it over to get it professionally edited, even though I had it by, I thought, 3 professionals, it came back with over 5,000 edits.
Right.
Because you
And
don't.
that's important. That's important to note because most people will think, well, I have Microsoft Word and it does spell check. So
Oh
I don't
my
have to
word.
worry. I don't
Oh
have
my
to worry
word.
about that. And I'm like, and I know going through the process for our book that here I am, I'm adept at writing, and I know how to use spell check, and I know my punctuation. I know how to do all of those things, but there were still a tremendous amount of errors that most people would not see, but an editor will see. And I know we had this conversation before we first began. It's all about quality. It's the same as running a business. The product that you put out reflects your mission statement when it comes
Absolutely.
to quality and how much you care about, in this case, your readers. And, I don't want my readers fumbling over words or catching errors in publication after the book is published, because then that shows that it was done in a sloppy manner. And that's a quality issue you can't overcome once you publish that book and people start reading it. It's got to reflect what you believe about yourself and your business. And what I believe is I would not put out a product like that unless it was absolutely 100% perfect. So that when someone's reading it, the content was correct, the spelling was correct, the framing of the chapters was correct, punctuation was proper. All of those things. I mean, there's no reason to publish a book nowadays without having someone look over all of that before it goes to publication and into the hands of the eventual reader.
I agree. I agree 100%. I think you really hit on a huge aspect of it is that I can't tell many people are like, well, you know what? I don't want to get it professionally edited. I'm just going to
Right.
publish it and just get it out because they're excited to get it out. And I have to tell them, I need to caution you to stop. It's going to destroy your brand if you publish this. And so many people have not listened. And
Right.
then I look on the reviews on Amazon and they are being blasted because what they published was not credible, was not professional, was not at the level of a published book. And now their reputation in that industry, even though they might be an expert, is decreased greatly because they didn't go through the proper steps. So that's an important aspect of making sure it's framed correctly, making sure it's correctly edited. Through our publishing house, we go through 5 layers of editing. First, when it comes in, it gets reviewed to see if we can even work with this, if it meets our criteria of quality. Then, if we agree that it would work, and I do an interview actually with the author and interview them and say, are you teachable and coachable? I'm not going to argue with you over grammar. We use the Chicago manual style. And if you're going to argue with me, we're not going to bring you on. If there's preference where you want chocolate and I want vanilla, you're the author, I will defer to you, but I will not compromise quality in our publishing house as the publisher.
Right.
And that's something that elevates us. And I've had so many readers tell me, you know what, I look at the publisher and I will buy their books from the publisher because I know the quality of the publishing house. And that's
Right.
so important when you're moving forward. When I was first wrote my first manuscript, I got 3 traditionally published contracts. And as I looked at their publishing house, I reviewed all their publications and all their books, and and some of them it was the same cover on all the books they published. They just changed the title and the author's name, and I'm like, each book is unique. I don't think you should do that. That's kind of like a weak way out, or that's not an effective way to market or professionally handle your book. So for me, that was was out. And I had some people say, Kim, you have the skill set to create your own publishing house. You need to do that. And so I started that. But I think you brought up a really good point about the credibility. That's so important. Even if you're not a business owner, for yourself, for your personal brand, to have that. Because one thing I find is that when you speak, you're only reaching that audience. But when you have a written word in the form of an excellent published book, you can then share that with others. And then people will say, great, I want to get 3 books, one for myself and one for 2 of my friends. And your message has now had a ripple effect that's just exploded that you did not have if you didn't have a book.
Yeah, and you know, when you publish something that is not of high quality and you start getting trashed online for it, like on Amazon or Ingram
So
or
true.
one of the many sites out
Barnes and
there,
Noble,
yeah,
Bar Books
Barnes
a
and Noble,
Billion,
wherever it might be,
Walmart.
you have a couple of issues here. Number one, people are going to stop buying the book because a lot of times on Amazon, especially Amazon, they're going off the reviews, and if they see 1-star reviews that something isn't spelled very well, it's going to turn them off.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
then, are you there?
Oh, I
Okay, so
am still there. I
sorry.
stopped our screen share.
Okay, so you know, you have that issue there where people will stop buying the book. And then the second issue is that that could be so demoralizing that you never write again, never write another book because you feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, you didn't get the help that you needed. You know, no one knows how to split an atom until they become a physicist. And you need the training to do that. We don't want you splitting atoms in your basement, right?
No,
So,
that would be
so,
bad. That
so,
would be very
so
bad.
you know, I think it's really important to know what you're doing because if you, and the other thing too is if you publish something with someday, you know, every author has the thoughts of becoming Stephen King, or one of the, like John Maxwell or one of the other great writers. And so they're thinking, you know, I just need to get this book published. And then a publishing house, a real publishing house like Random House or something will pick me up. Getting published by a traditional publisher is not all it's cracked up to be. They retain all the rights. I mean, they will strip you of everything. And you're going to wonder, wait a minute, why did I go with them? But you're never going to even get that far if you publish something that's garbage, and they're going to review what you've published in the past before they extend it, even if they extend a contract offer. And you know, I found out things along the way, like if I went with a traditional publisher, I'd still have to pre-sell 10,000 books and they still get to keep all the rights to my book. And that, you know, begged the question to me, if I have to do all that, what do I need you for? And that's the reason why I went with you with Deep Waters, because I get to keep more of what I sell.
Absolutely.
I get to retain my rights. No one can turn something into a movie someday without my permission. All of that stuff, not that they're ever going to make a movie out of the book, but if they did, and it's traditional publishing, I would have lost those rights. And so that's a lot of things that people don't understand about, you know, just publishing whatever you have at hand. You really need the help.
Actually, you bring up a really good point, and one is on the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing or an independent publisher. So, traditional publisher is pretty much similar to you have a baby and you give it up for adoption, and the adoptive parents then can rename your child. Then it's their child. You've given up your parental rights. The same thing for a book. You've given up your intellectual rights with us. Why I created this publishing house was because I wanted authors to maintain their intellectual rights but have the high quality. So what I found was that if you go with a traditional publisher, you're right, normally there is no marketing budget for a first time author, despite your platform, which is how many followers you have or how many emails you have. Despite your platform, there's no marketing budget for a first time author. Also, there is your gosh, what you can get per book on royalty. So if you get an advance, let's just say you get an advance of $10,000. So just for the ease of math, let's say if you get $1 per book in royalties, normally for traditional publisher, your first time author, it's much lower than that. So that's 70 cents a book. But if you get $1 per book, that means you would have to sell 10,000 copies. That means to sell through. You sold through. which is rarely happens with authors. They sell through and get their first royalty check. So you have to sell 10,000 copies before you make $1 in royalties. So it's like an advance. People don't understand that as well. And again, they've lost all their
Right.
intellectual rights, which is really important to understand to maintain that. So you have traditional publishing where you lose your intellectual rights. There's not a lot of marketing because I have a lot of my clients who want to hire me to market them who've been traditionally published because they have been like, wait a minute, no one that I can't get any help in marketing. I thought they would help me. I've gotten no help. I need to market my book. Also, um, then they can, some people will go with self-publishing. And again, the quality there, they're not going through the 5 layers of editing, and the quality that they produce, that's being produced is abysmal. It's really sad. It brings down the publishing industry. So what I did is actually created a publishing house who allows my author to keep their intellectual rights, but has that high quality of the traditional publishing, which is what you found with publishing your book or our
Yeah.
book, a dynamic chat GPT on using AI for business, which is a very powerful and helpful tool on creating
Yeah.
those prompts.
And I would say that, when I look at the difference between a traditional publisher and a hybrid type of an environment, it's like the difference between being an entrepreneur and an employee. When you are going with
Great.
a traditional publishing house, you're like a very poorly paid employee who you're doing everything that you're producing. You're not producing for you, you're producing for them.
All right.
And it's kind of the attitude of, okay, great, you finished your first book. Now you need to go out and sell 10,000 copies for us to justify having paid you up front. And we're only paying you 70 or 80 cents a book. And then, you're constantly working to fulfill contracts, which again, it makes you feel like an employee. You're producing creatively so that someone else can get the benefit and the credit for it. And in a hybrid environment, everything's yours. The rights are yours. The book is yours. The
Absolutely.
royalties are far higher. I mean, oh my gosh, multiple dollars per book, depending on the price of the book. And from that, I just think that, why if they're going to force you to go out and market your own book traditionally, um, then why don't we go out and do the same thing on your own with a hybrid publisher and make more
And own and keep your intellectual rights,
and
which is
keep your
so
rights? I mean, yeah, why would you give all that up? Even though your name's on the book, someone else owns the rights to it. And to me, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, there's no logic in that, to follow that path.
and that brings up a huge point. Absolutely. I agree 100%. So any last remarks or a piece of gems of wisdom or advice you'd like to leave for our listeners or our viewers before we end our webinar?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think it's important that they understand, and I'm not saying this just because you're my wife and my business partner, but you are my business partner because of the skills and the expertise that you have in so many areas. I mean, there's no one else I'd want working on our business projects besides you with the marketing and many of the things that we do. But it's so important to have the right mentors. I was fortunate along the way in my life to have the mentors that came along when they did, and being teachable and coachable and allowing them to impart wisdom in the things that I wanted to do. And I think you have a level of expertise, and it's unique. You're not just a publisher, you're also an author. So you know the process that authors go through, but you also know the publishing side. And that's something most authors do not understand. And
Absolutely.
so, having someone that can guide you through, these are two very distinct paths that need to be mastered, and need to be done well. Otherwise, no matter how well you've written, if the publishing isn't done right, if the marketing's not done right,
Absolutely.
it's a disaster. And I think, it's very important to have someone that knows how to guide you through all of that. And you did it with us. I saw,
Mm.
even though being married, I saw you publish your books, write them, publish them, so forth. It was the first time we worked on a creative process like that with a book. And I saw the necessity of having someone with that level of expertise be able to come alongside me and show me things that I thought were, I would read it and say, "Oh, this is brilliant." And then you would read it and say, "No, that needs to be changed." And then my feelings would be a little hurt for a few minutes. And then I realized you're only doing this because you're trying to make it better. And then as we went along, I realized, wow, it is better when you're allowing someone who knows what they're talking about to have an influence on your book. So better to have that influence early and from the start
Absolutely.
than, half or full way through a manuscript and it has to be
Absolutely.
completely rewritten. It's if you're serious about, especially if you're, I want to say as a business owner, if you're serious about your career and you have a level of expertise in an area that would benefit others, you're losing out on an income stream
Absolutely.
that you're currently not tapping into. And that
Absolutely.
income stream is coming from a book that's going to develop your sphere of influence. And that sphere of influence is something that you're probably not being paid on right now. And that book will help you get paid and create a secondary revenue stream for you from that sphere of influence based on your expertise that they find in the book. But that's only going to happen if the book's well written. And it's only going to be well written if you have somebody like you, my lovely wife, by their side, guiding them all the way along.
And that's a great point. And I loved how you wrapped in my experience. And those of you who don't know, I have a master's of science in business from Johns Hopkins in marketing. I'm a former marketing college 400 level professor or instructor. So I do have extensive experience in marketing. That's very rare to find an author that's a publisher who also has marketing experience and who can help you become a bestseller.
Right.
That's very rare. And I've actually even consulted with other authors who to create their own publishing house. And many people said, "Well, what are you doing, Kim? That's crazy. You're creating more competition for yourself." And I'm like, there's plenty of business out there. My goal is to raise up the level of publishing that what is produced out there is to a higher standard, which is what we do at Deep Waters Books. And I thank you for being teachable and coachable because during the process we were writing it, I thought there was times where one of us was not going to make it to dinner or or that because it's definitely hard, especially to having to listen and to listen to someone and you're thinking, "Hey, I'm good. I'm a business owner. I've written before." No, you've never
Mm,
written for a publication. You need to check your ego at the door. And we
yeah,
need to help you produce a quality publication that's something that will be around for a long time and be very helpful. So
yeah.
well done. You
And
did a great job with your book.
well, thank
Our
you.
book. Our
Our
book.
book, and I thank you for being patient and not killing me along the way,
You're
allowing
welcome.
me to live,
You're
and
welcome.
I think that people will benefit from this course. Is it expensive? Well, it's more expensive to publish garbage and have your reputation irreparably harmed than it is to put out, $1,000 and learn how to write this thing properly. I mean, it all comes down to how serious are you about producing this? It's almost like a child. You mentioned something earlier, and I was thinking about this. You have the choice. Your child can be beautiful, or your child can be butt ugly. You you have the ability to make that decision up front.
Right.
And I think all of us want our child to be beautiful. And if you want that to happen, you're going to need expertise to make that happen.
That's a good, well, it's a good point. You do want a quality publication. You want something you can be proud of. Absolutely. And
Right.
that's something, and just looking at that, on my first book, I had to do 3 rewrites, which took me a year on each one.
Mm,
That was expensive for time. If I look at what I earn per hour
yeah,
in the workforce, $1,000 is nothing because in
right.
3 years, it took me hours and hours and hours and hours. That cost me probably, I want to say, close to $30,000 in
Right.
time. And to spend $1,000 to avoid that, that's a very good ROI. It's a return on your investment, which is a very good, I mean, that's a wise expense as opposed to writing it and having sit there and rewrite it. I know a lot of my people I know have written books, but have not written them in a way people want to read them and are not open to any type of consulting or any type of advice. And as a result, they don't get published, or if they do, they publish it and it's bad.
Right.
So as of that, we're going to end now. Thank you for joining us. We do have a Write Your Book Masterclass program coming up through deepwatersbooks.com. We'd love for you to join us. Or if you do have a manuscript, submit it to info@deepwatersbooks.com. We'd love to review it, see if it's a good fit. And Ron Clark, thank you so much for being our guest.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You guys have a great day out there.